general, I would say our economy is doing really well, and most of the signs are overwhelmingly, almost unbelievably positive. However, there are some things in our economy lurking beneath the surface that do scare me. So this data comes from the Beige Book. It's one of my favorite economic indicators. The Federal Reserve puts it out 8 times a year, and it is a collection of stories. Basically, all the Federal Reserve banks across the country, San Francisco, Dallas, St. Louis, Chicago, Richmond, New York, all of these banks all across the country, they make a lot of calls to businesses and workers in their local area, and they start collecting stories. And a lot of times these stories will foreshadow much bigger trends that show up later in the economy. So the latest issue of the Beige Book just dropped last week, and mostly it was pretty positive, but there were some themes that scared me a lot. This is an excerpt from the Beige Book chapter from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and basically it just says it's starting to see people spending less. And that might not sound very scary. It's like, okay, so people are buying a little less, they might be trading down a little bit. But here is the thing about consumer spending. That is the load-bearing beam of the US economy. Us shopping, us going out and buying stuff, that makes up about 2/3 of the entire economy. So if people stop shopping or shop less, that is a very scary sign for our economy. So with that in mind, here are 3 of the scariest stories from this latest Beige Book. So the first scary story comes from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, and it noticed that customers were, quote, trading down, going from combo meals to value meals at fast food restaurants, and even very high-end consumers were buying less high-end stuff. So this is just showing that people have less money to spend, and that is really bad news. When people are buying less stuff, or in this case, trading down, spending less money, that means businesses are making less money. So those businesses are going to expand more slowly, or they're not going to expand, which means they're going to hire more slowly, or they're not going to hire. And in some cases, they're going to start laying people off. Now, we're definitely not there yet. In fact, layoffs are near a 20-year low right now. But this is a scary sign. Scary story number 2 from the Beige Book comes from the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas, and it said businesses were reporting lots of payment delays. Customers are paying later. They are delaying payments, and this is putting a financial strain on businesses. And our final scary story from the Beige Book comes from the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. Cleveland reports that because the cost of living is going up, more and more people are having to borrow money from friends or relatives just for necessities, just to make ends meet, or rely on credit. Now, this is scary for a lot of reasons. Obviously, number 1 is you don't want to see the cost of living rising so fast that people just can't afford it, that they're having to borrow money in order to just live their regular lives. Another reason this is scary is if it's potentially a sign that our economic recovery is not sustainable. Our economy's gotten really used to people spending at a certain level, and it's starting to seem like maybe that level is not sustainable, and consumers on a very large scale are going to have to start scaling back, and that is going to have huge implications for businesses and jobs all across the country if this continues. Now, one thing I do want to point out is for the last few years, our economy has just been consistently beating the odds. Our economy has proved to be incredibly strong, incredibly resilient, and so have all of us. That is something important to keep in mind, because sometimes a strange sound in the attic is just a strange sound in the attic. Of course, sometimes it's not.